Hey, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Ashley. We're the founders of For the Good, a community created to empower and elevate you to live a purpose-driven life.
Our mission is to bring light into our world, and to do so, we have learned that it must start within.
We are so glad to have you here with us. Hi friends, we are back. We've had episodes chatting with guests here on the podcast, and today it's Jordan and I, and we are going to dive in on the power in sharing our stories. So recently we watched 7 Yards. It's a new documentary on Netflix based on the true story of Chris Norton, and it is one of resiliency, faith, and determination. He was given a 3% chance to move from his neck down after a college football accident, and against all odds, against what some doctors told him, he's went far beyond what they said was possible. So that story has been an inspiration for this podcast, because for him to be able to come out and share something so difficult, a hardship that has happened to him, to be able to serve others is incredible. So we wanted to dedicate this podcast today to sharing those hard stories and the power that it has. Recently, Jordan and I were asked to join the Resilient Purpose podcast to share our story. And it was one of transformation, because I know that too often we believe that our story is too much, it's not enough, or we wonder if anyone out there can relate. And this is a mission that we've had here at For the Good, to be able to share these stories. And that is the purpose of our For the Good podcast. In the beginning, in February 2020, is when we started this podcast. And that, as I said, was our mission, to be able to come on here and share not only our story, but to be able to bring on guests and have them share their story as well. And it has been such an empowering time for us to be able to connect with other people who struggled in the beginning and had these hardships and trials and tribulations, and now they are serving so many other people, and it is such a way to be able to bring light into our world. So as I mentioned, we were invited to join them on this podcast, and I'm really proud of Jordan as an example, because it has been a transformation that I've seen with him and how he's been able to take that step forward and share his story here as well.
Well, as Ashley mentioned, I think for both of us, we had a little bit of time where we knew what we wanted to say about what we had gone through in our personal stories, but you start to, as she said, think about, is this really going to reach people? Is this something that I want to talk about? Is it something that I want people to know about me? And there was every voice in the world was telling you, just maybe keep it to yourself, or this isn't the time to really open up about those things. But I think the driving factor for both of us was thinking that if we do share our stories, there's someone out there who's going to be helped by it. There's someone who's either going through it or has a family member that's going through it, or, someone who maybe not be going through that particular problem, but is experiencing hardship in their life, and they need someone to say it's possible to get through this. It's possible to come out the other end. And I think at the end of the day, the biggest thing was thinking that we could help someone by sharing our story is what got us to break through and able to speak about it. So as she talked about this documentary that we watched, that was the biggest takeaway, is just how easily this man could have sat there, got this horrible news, and just said, you know what, well, that's it. Like, my life is changing forever. There's nothing I can do about it. I'm gonna accept what the doctors told me, and I'm just gonna lay in this hospital bed for the rest of my life. But I think from the beginning, if you watch this story, you'll see that there was never a chance for him to have any doubt. There was never a chance to believe in the negative. It was always positive thinking. It was always, I'm going to be part of the 3% that's able to beat this. They're not giving me a chance, but they don't know me. I'm giving myself the chance. And I think for Chris as well, with his story, he also knew that one day he's going to be able to share this with someone else, and that he wanted to be an example for the next person that's going to get this horrible news to look at him and say, all right, if he did it, I can do it. And I think there's so much strength behind, looking past what your current problem is and thinking ahead and saying, well, I want to be the example that comes through this on the other end and shows people that it's possible to still have a life, to still make your dreams a reality. And even if those dreams have to shift a bit, there's always another light at the end. There's always a way to turn it into something good and to something beneficial in your life.
And I think sometimes, there also is a stigma or shame related to people's stories. Someone who goes through depression or feels anxiety or just something really, really difficult, a traumatic experience, they feel as though this might be too much for someone else, as I mentioned earlier, and that there is that shame and stigma related to it. But there is such a power in sharing those things. And, for me personally, I've experienced this transformation within myself. And in that transformation, I found healing within. I feel like that's such a benefit to sharing what we've experienced with others. Is it not only is able to serve someone else, but it helps us on our journey as well. It was last year when I began sharing my story after working with a business coach, and I told her how I want to be able to serve and help people. And she said, to really be able to dig deep in there, you are going to have to share your story as well, and to be able to really deepen that connection with other people. And I'll be honest, I was afraid and I didn't know what other people would think when I did share those hard-won parts of my life that I experienced. And along the way, I found that there is such a connection that you can feel with other people when you are able to get yourself out there and share. And it doesn't need to look like, creating a documentary as Chris did, or coming onto a podcast and sharing it with the world. It can be, sharing it with a friend or a family member, someone close to you that you trust. And I think that that is the first step that you can take, is sharing that with someone else and allowing them into that space and seeing that other people are there to, connect with you on this deep and meaningful level. And even if it isn't something that they experienced, it is something that, when we share those stories, it can inspire someone else to do that as well.
I remember having a conversation with Ashley because when she first started on her journey, the biggest thing I noticed is that you could visibly see that there was a weight that was lifted from her when she began talking about her experiences and everything that she experienced in her life. And watching her grow through that experience and share these things with people, I truly realized that sharing your story wasn't essentially just healing yourself, but then in turn looking at how it affected other people. And, even in the beginning, I remember talking to Ashley and I told her, I don't know if I'm ever going to get to a point where I want to share my story. I don't know if I really want to get into the details of the things I've been through and, the hard times that I've experienced. I'd gone back and forth a bunch of times on it, and the biggest thing was that there was never any pressure. Ashley didn't look at me and say, well, look how it helped me. You have to get this, off of your chest. You have to say it. You have to say it. It was, when you feel comfortable. And if you never do, you never do. But when you feel comfortable and when you feel like sharing your story, I believe that, we are in a position now where we can turn this into something positive. We can help people with this. And that was something to reflect on for the longest time. Because, with a lot of people out there, I'm sure, some that are listening may be experiencing the same thing. You don't necessarily want people to know some of the bad things. You don't want people to kind of get that insight into the deepest days that you've had. But like we talk about, there's so much healing, not only to share that with people, but for yourself to finally release that and to go into the day and not be carrying that with you or worrying about these days coming back to you. So there's so much power to be gained in sharing a story. And when I finally did open up about things, I experienced the same thing Ashley did, where I truly felt a weight just being lifted from me. And knowing that people I knew were going to be, listening and hearing all of this, I could tell that there was, people who saw me in my life who didn't know these things were going on, and maybe that explained a lot of things to them of why I wasn't around or why I seemed different when I was with them. And, that was hard to comprehend at first was, do I want people to really know this thing? Like, this is a very personal, deep issue. I don't know if I can really, say in detail what was going on. But like Ashley said, the point of today is letting you know that there is so much purpose behind sharing a story. It's not just for yourself. There's so many people that can be affected. And I'm so happy that both of us were able to dig deep and to share these reasons, share these stories, because it's not easy to do.
Yeah, I think too often in our society, we're taught to be perfect. But in reality, we're human. We're human beings, and we are not called to be perfect. And it is when we share those imperfect parts of ourselves with the world is when we can really touch someone else's life. Because I think especially, we talk about in previous episodes about social media and, just the way the world, you see all of these pictures and videos and you believe that everybody's life is just perfect and everything, fits together and they haven't experienced anything difficult. But behind the scenes, right now there are thankfully a lot of people sharing their stories and sharing the reality of, the backstory of their lives to be able to serve people in this space. And I think that is so empowering for people's mental health to know that, everyone struggles with something. And it is important to be able to share those parts with someone else. Like I said, in the podcast that we were on, one question they asked is, what can someone do today to be able to take the step forward and, free themselves to be able to share their story? And as I shared a couple minutes back, I said that, start with one person. Start by sharing it with someone that you trust, because it can be really, really difficult. I remember when I first shared, my story with Jordan, I started sweating. I was really nervous. I felt my heart racing. What is he going to think? And once you share that, it feels like there's a weight lifted off of you. And it feels like rather than carrying that something heavy with you, you release that, you let that go. And, I really like for Jordan to share what he shared on the podcast as well, because I feel like that was really empowering.
I would say to someone who has a story that they're wanting to share something that's in their past, I think the biggest thing for them is to go with a positive mindset and to try to look at it in a way that's going to be comforting, in a way that's going to have a purpose behind it. So what I mean is, for both Ashley and I think it was so easy to sit there and just be negative about the situation, or to say, well, when I was first going through these issues, I was just thinking, there's something wrong with me. Why did this happen to me? Is there ever going to be another day where I'm out of it, or is this it for me? Am I just going to be depressed and miserable and going through life not really wanting to experience these things again? And as soon as you start turning the way you perceive it and the way you look at it, it starts to open up doors for you. So as I said, as I was watching Ashley, I was still carrying all this guilt and carrying all these negative feelings about what I had experienced. And all of a sudden, I realized, well, if I do open up, if I do share this, I hope someone's going to learn from this, or I hope I learn from this. I hope I, by putting it out there, can then hold myself accountable to say, I'm never going to allow myself to get back into that space. I'm going to use this negative experience to round out my perception of everything I know about the issue and the situation, and I'm going to move forward in a positive direction. And I think that's the only way that we should be looking at it, because something I also mentioned in that podcast was, in order to truly have the highest highs and have these extreme feelings of happiness and having extreme gratitude and thankfulness, you also have to have the extreme lows, and you have to feel the sadness and sometimes the guilt and the depression and those hard things that we go through, because that gives you kind of a better look at the whole spectrum of feeling and emotion. And in order to know when you're having these really good days, you also have to have those really bad days, so that you know the difference, and you know that, okay, this is something I want to feel good, I want to feel better. And then all of a sudden your mind starts telling you, okay, well, in order to keep feeling better, you got to be doing this. You have to, look at things a certain way. And I think as soon as you commit your mind to looking for the good in a situation, or, almost looking a step beyond where you're at to see how this is going to benefit you, your life starts putting things in motion to keep you in a better place.
So this is something that I dove more into last year when I published my book called The Mountains We Climb. And the message of the book is about transforming our story into one that serves with purpose. I believe that we are not called to stuff and tuck, these experiences away deep within us. I believe that God wants us to use it for good, to be able to bring hope and healing to others. And when we hold it inside, it won't transform us or have the ability to touch anyone else. And I believe in these difficult times that we experience, we can often wonder, why is this happening to me? But I know that God doesn't use anything for our harm. And that really, rounds back to what we talked about earlier in Chris's situation. He experienced, something that was really tragic. And he could have allowed himself to sit and just allow these circumstances to overcome him. And rather than allowing that to happen, he felt empowered, and he allowed his faith to be able to shine, out within himself. And that resiliency and perseverance and determination came through in the most difficult of time. And that's something else that we've talked about in another podcast, is about how in those difficult times our true strength can be found. So his is one of inspiration. And I felt like, after we watched that documentary, it was something that we really wanted to put this episode together to be able to allow other people to know that there's such a power in talking about these hard things. And you never know who in this world you're able to help when you do so, because too often we feel like we are walking this journey alone, especially when it comes to something that is hard. And it just helps to be able to connect with other people in the space and know that hope and healing is possible.
Yeah, just another thing I noticed also in the documentary. One thing that stood out to me was when Chris's mom, especially, she was sharing her feelings on how, as this was going on and she was trying to process everything, she then started having all this, doubt and this kind of worriedness and being scared for her son's future, thinking, what's life going to look like for him? Is he ever going to meet anyone? I wanted him to get married and to have a family, and how is this going to happen? What if, he's just alone for the rest of his life? How is he going to deal with this? And, when you watch it, you'll see that there were people that, were comforting her, and also Chris himself telling her, this isn't going to change anything. The type of person he is, everything's going to work out. There's going to be someone incredible that finds him, that shares this connection with him, that's meant to be with him. And this accident isn't going to change this. This is going to bring about the perfect person. And as we're watching, you end up finding out that he meets this incredible woman, and it just seems like it was written to be this way. And all of a sudden when they meet and they have this incredible story, it's amazing to see the progression of their relationship and how, she took on this role of also being a caregiver for him. And before I get to that, I want to talk a little bit about his friends too. He had an amazing group of friends in college that brought him back, that were able to get him back into this normal routine, to give his life some sort of normalcy. And they, spent their time taking care of him and, sleeping next to him at night to help him out if anything happened, to get him up and ready in the morning, to go to class, to go out and have a social life. And they gave him, this opportunity by taking pressure on themselves because they loved and cared for him so much. And as he met his wife Emily, and you see the beginnings of their story and how she took on the role of being a caregiver as well, and sacrificing some of her time and her energy to give that life to him, and everything that he was giving to her and teaching her, these deep personal life lessons along the way. It was just an extreme bond that you tend to think, if he didn't have this accident, maybe they never meet and they never have that connection. And then you get this feeling that, through God, this is exactly the person that was meant to come into his life. And as this accident happened, that's how they ended up having this connection and meeting. And you start seeing that there's always a bigger story at play. And especially toward the end, what you're going to see is that, his wife is very big into fostering and, looking after kids who didn't have a good upbringing and didn't have a good chance to really excel in life. And she took it on herself to be a caregiver for them as well. And all of a sudden, they get married and they end up having, are they up to 7 children now? They have 7 kids?
Yeah, they have 5 adopted, and I'm pretty sure that they're fostering 1 or 2 right now, which is incredible.
So you look at all these children who never would have had this opportunity, who never would have had this family, and given him going through this experience, his whole life changes, but then he meets his wife, and now they have this life that they built together on pure love and faith and helping and sharing that story to help other people. And all of a sudden these children come into their lives, and now these children have a loving family that they never would have had. And for us, the biggest thing was to see how him laying in that hospital bed getting that horrible news, there's a decision to be made right off the bat where he could say, all right, this is my life from now on. It is what it is. I'm just going to be paralyzed. I'm not going to be able to do anything. My life is basically over. And he chose to say, this is my new challenge. I'm gonna be the person that, gains function back in my legs. I'm going to walk across the stage to get my diploma. I'm gonna walk my wife down the aisle when we get married. And I'm not gonna let being in a wheelchair or being, partially paralyzed change my life. I'm going to use it to help other people. I'm going to give these children a life they never would have had. And all of a sudden, you see how many people he immediately touched and affected, but then you look at this documentary and all of a sudden millions of people are now able to access his story and see change in their life and take it as a positive reinforcement in their life as well. So that goes to show you the power of sharing a story and the power of resilience and going for it and just knowing that there's a bigger stage in life, and if we don't even understand it right now, there is always a purpose to everything.
Whatever your story may be, whether it be like Chris or like Jordan and I, relating to grief, substance abuse, anything in this space, know that you have the power to share your story. And there is such an incredible healing and transformation that is found within. As we wrap up this episode today, I want to share this quote that really touches my heart. And it starts with, "One day, the mountain that is in front of you will be so far behind you, it will barely be visible in the distance. But the person you become in learning to get over it, that will stay with you forever. And that is the point of the mountain." So in this quote, obviously we're relating, a mountain to a hardship, a trial, something difficult that you are experiencing. So there is something to be said about, when we walk through difficult times and how that has ability to change us for the good. We are able to make that choice, as we've talked about in this episode and previous episodes, about how we are going to allow that to impact us. So right now, as you're listening, know that you have a choice. You are able to allow it to hurt and hinder you and carry that weight along with you on life's journey, or you can free yourself. So today I encourage you, as we talked about, to start with one. Start with one person that you trust, family, friend, a loved one, coworker, whoever it looks like in your space, and know that healing is possible. And if you want to learn more about our story, we didn't really dive in too much into that here today because we wanted to, focus on this premise of the power of sharing our stories. Check out previous episodes here on the For the Good podcast. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. Have a great day and make today count.
Thanks for joining us at the For the Good podcast. We would love to connect with you. Join us on Facebook and Instagram at For the Good Official and our blog at forthegood.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode.
Remember, a positive mindset is the beginning of true happiness, not just for the good of the individual, but for the good of the world.